Hey everybody, my name is Angela Kadani, and again, I have been the director and CEO of KidzStuff Child Care Center in Baltimore City, Maryland for the last 10 years. Today, again, I'm joined by Mrs. Aaron from Leaps of Speech. We together are going to bring some tips that you can use at home. Let me rephrase that. I'm going to be asking some questions. Miss Aaron is going to be bringing some tips that you can use at home over the next 4 weeks to help your child enhance and or begin to really receive speech, the skills to begin speaking, the skills for reading, the skills for sign language, as well as the skills for narrating. So if you didn't see our introductory video, we're coming together just to close a gap, really, in our community. So one of our goals here at KidzStuff Child Care Center is to close the school readiness gap in Baltimore. So in Baltimore City, unfortunately, only 38 children out of 100 children show up to school ready. And that's pretty low in our community. And so our mission is to work alongside of our local school district to close that school readiness gap. And just in line with our mission, we came together to close a gap that we find in our community. Literally a learning loss that has been enhanced by the COVID pandemic. So unfortunately, children are not talking at the rate that they should be talking. What happened at KidzStuff was that we found out we had an entire toddler room that wasn't making noise. It was a little eerie. You could go into the classroom and all the children are moving about, all the children are playing, they're following directions, which lets us know that cognitively everything is okay, but their mouths weren't moving. So we discovered that that was because they didn't see our mouths moving. So they were talking to us the way that they saw us talking to them. The mask was on, no lips were moving, and so the children were not moving their lips. They weren't forming words. So we called in an outside agency to help us with some therapy, but we found that it just wasn't enough. And referring children to outside agencies because they're overwhelmed, they're short-staffed, the children still aren't getting the necessary assistance. And so I'm coming together, or KidzStuff is coming together with Leaps of Speech Learning, to be able to give you some tips on what you can do at home to assist children until they have seen a speech pathologist. So we're gonna ask Miss Aaron some questions and she's gonna give us some tips, okay? So today we're gonna focus on reading.
Yes, reading.
What is reading? And how should you read? There's a specific way we should read to our children. I know that we don't necessarily think that. You just pick up a book and you just start mouthing the words that are on the page. But there is a very specific way that we can read to our children that she has taught me. I am learning that we can read to our children to assist them with talking.
Yeah. So reading is such a powerful tool for children of all ages. And parents will ask me, well, when do I start reading to my child? From birth. You can start reading to your child before birth, when they're in utero. But for now, we're talking about birth and toddler years. You can start reading to your child today, because my recommendation is always that you read to your child daily, at least once a day. And if you can do twice, 3 times a day, considering your schedule, your lifestyle, I say go for it. Reading is a very powerful tool.
So there is something called the million word, I think it's called gap, that especially in the African American community, our children show up to school with 1 million less words than other children. And one of the reasons why they believe that that exists is because of the lack of reading at home, and or children are not in a facility, or early learning facility, where they're getting other types of reading as well, or their teachers reading to them throughout the day as a part of all of the lessons that happen in the classroom. And so by doing these things at home, you actually give your children an opportunity to learn vocabulary words that we don't use in our everyday conversation. There are words that we use in the book that I never say when I'm just literally talking to my friends or talking to my family. And so it's so important that you pick up a book to read to the children on a regular basis to enhance their exposure to many different types of words. words, to increase their vocabulary. And so when you talk about reading in utero, I know that's very early on. I have no idea when children can start hearing inside. However, we do know that they can't hear, right? And so reading. So what kind of books should they read at that stage?
Okay, so I would say, for one, you're going to want to pick up, I'm going to say simple books. Books that may have one word, books that may have 1 to 2 sentences in on each page to help the child focus, as well as using books that have big pictures, colorful pictures, or large black and white pictures to really gain their attention. So that would be in utero, that would be once the child is born, that would also be as a toddler, and that's a great place to start as you move up.
So I can't read Narnia, which is one of my favorite books.
Hey, you can. When you're look, when you're reading, read out loud. Whatever you're reading, read out loud.
That's a really good tip. So that means that if I am cooking and I'm reading a recipe, read it out loud so that your child is able to hear the recipe. If I am reading directions to put something together, read it out loud, because children need to know 1- and 2-step directions in order to move toward being school ready. And so those things that we think might not be useful as we go about our normal day-to-day lives in the area of reading, they could be very useful to our children.
Very
All right,
useful.
so my child is an infant. Let's say we have 3 months. What should I be reading?
One of my favorite books, that's going to be Brown Bear, right? So Brown Bear is a great book. It has the large animals. Come on. This one's been worn out a little bit. You have the large animals, right? You have the short sentences. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. You know what's also great about this book? It's called Brown Bear. B, the sound B, the letter B, the sound B, is one of the earlier developing sounds. So your child is hearing B, Brown Bear, over and over again, right? And with this book, we can talk about so many other things. I'm going to get into some of the tips and techniques of reading with your child, right? So we're reading, we're pointing as we read so that we can show our child how we read. What is the orientation? Well, we read from left to right, right? Your child, as they become more mobile, or they have more of the fine motor skills, can start to turn those pages.
Nice.
We're using a board book, so it's a lot easier for those little ones to turn the pages, right? We have animals. What can we target here? We can talk about the color. Ooh, I see that yellow duck. Do you see the yellow duck? We can talk about the animal sounds. Quack, quack. The duck says quack, right? We can move through the book. We're labeling items. We're talking about animals. We're talking about the animal sounds. We're modeling language, and it's just a fun book. The kids love it, so you're bound to have a good time. And there, at the end, you have all of the animals that you can kind of go through and show your child. Demonstrate, what does it look like to point? I see a black sheep. I see a brown bear. The bear says, roar. I see, is that what the bear says? I think that's what the bear says. I see a green frog. The frog says, ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Now, I have to make a disclaimer. You may think, I'm reading to my child, but if they can't communicate verbally and say things, what are they really taking in? And I can tell you, based on my experience as both a speech pathologist, an educator who was a teacher, a mother, a parent, an aunt, all of these things, that children are getting it. They're listening, they're hearing the words that you're saying when you're reading. They're in tune, and they're enjoying it. So keep doing it. The more you do it, you will notice, or you should notice, that your child is enjoying it more and more. Now, I'll give another disclaimer.
Okay.
You may have a child who tosses the book, who flips the pages, tries to rip the pages, mouths the book. That's okay. They are engaging with the literature. Keep on doing it. And, you know, get them involved. Let them turn the page. If you notice they're not getting through an entire book, that's okay. Set a goal. Today we got through 3 pages of the book. Tomorrow, let's try for 4. You set that goal for yourself and just enjoy the reading. Most importantly, as your child gets older and they start to have the things that they really like, you notice that they gravitate towards cars, animals, whatever it may be. Try to choose books that focus on their interests. And so these are some beginner books that I love. I have been reading to my children since they were born, and that's Brown Bear. Girl of Mine is also a great book, and one of my favorites, a new favorite of mine, is Mama by Jimmy Fallon. A very simple book. Again, if you go through it, you have a picture, and you have just 2 words on there. Hat, which we can label, right? And we can show a child, Mommy has a hat, Daddy has a hat. And then you always have one animal on the page saying Mama. This book is great, especially if your kids haven't said Mama yet and they're just going da 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 da. This book. So you can encourage that type of labeling or communication as well. So as you see, very simple, right? Animals, so you can target animal sounds. Very simple.
Nice. Okay, so we heard some great things. So first, for our youngest readers or youngest learners, you want to have a book that's hard. Okay, you want to have these hard pages, a hard cover, hard spine, a hard back, right? Because they're little and they are going to throw the book. Let's be very clear about that. They're also going to rip pages from a book. But this is a way to make sure that your books last a little longer in your library as children are growing. And then we heard that pictures that are picture rich, or not pictures rich, books that are picture rich are very important, because children really are gravitating toward the colors, toward what it looks like, especially young learners, because you know they can't read. We're doing the reading for them. And that way it gives you an opportunity to talk about all the other things that are happening on the page as well. The colors, the sounds of the animals, the sounds of the letters, right? And then don't be so hard on yourself in this process. And also remember that your child is very young. They are not in college, and we do not have to give them a dissertation as they're reading at this young age. That's very important. Really, really be gentle with this process and enjoy the process. The more you enjoy it, the more your children will really learn to love reading, to love literature, and these things will grow as they begin to grow and to develop. And so you want to leave any final tips for them? Any final words?
Yeah, my final tips would be just to get into it. Think of a book that you could read today. And if you don't have one that immediately comes to mind, I would say check out your local library. They have great books, a great selection. Try to find one of these if you can. You can get the soft books as well that are really good for infants. The board books are great for toddlers or infants, of course. And just pick a time. Say, today, before my child goes to bed, that's going to be our time to read. Or when my child comes home and they just want to kind of relax, that's going to be our time to read. Pick your time, pick your book, and start today. No pressure.
Awesome. We really appreciate you tuning in with us today, and we hope that what you've heard today will be very helpful for you at home with your young learners. Please, please, please make sure that you read to your children. If at all possible, at least 2 times a day. When they get up in the morning, it's a great way to wake them up in the morning with a very nice, cuddly, soft time with you and reading a book. And when they lay down in the evening time, really they will learn to love reading, and it will help with your children's speech very early on. We'll see you next week, guys.